Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Instacarhk. For those of you who watched our last episode regarding the 348 GTB, I think it comes as no surprise that today we're reviewing this 1997 355 Berlinetta. Now, as mentioned in the last episode, the 355 was an instant success. It was one of the most beloved model out of the Ferrari V8 lineup. It became a modern classic more than 10 years ago, with prices rising and stabilizing since then. Now, although when it was released, Ferrari introduced a lot of very new techie elements to it, which I'll go into later, today, many people recognize the 355 as the last analog V8 Ferrari. And that is because its design principles largely can be traced back to the 308 you see at the very back there. Now, the engine, the block is the same as the 308. Of course, a lot of enhancements and improvements have been made to the engine since then. So with this one, the engine capacity has increased from the 348's 3.4 liter to 3.5 liter. Most importantly, this car for the first time has introduced the 5 valves per cylinder. All the V8s before this were 4 valves per cylinder. Now, the internals of the engine has also been improved, including the use of lightweight pistons and crank, which allows the 355 for the first time to go past 8,000 RPM with the red line of 8,500 RPM. With all this, the engine power has been increased from the 348's 320 horsepower to 375 horsepower. Ferrari released the 355 in '96 and production lasted until 1999. During those 4 years, they made 3,829 Berlinettas, the hardtop. But out of that, only 88 of them, 88 were right-hand drive F1s, being this one. So this is a 1 of 88 worldwide car, which is again super rare. Now it's time to go for a drive in this 355. This is my first time driving a 355, so now I'm about to have the full collection. I drove the 308 before, my own 328. In our last episode, I drove the 348, now the 355. So this is an F1 model, which I'm quite grateful for because the F1, whether you like it or not, is a very significant milestone for Ferrari, and the 355 being the first model to have it makes it a special car. So I'm very glad that we actually get to try out the F1 today instead of the manual. Okay, so let's try a start. This is an era where they already have this immobilizer that you have to press. All right, very civilized start, very engine note is not barky. But the 355, having said that, is actually the first V8 model with a very, very nice engine note and exhaust note, even in its original form. I remember growing up hearing one blast by the street when they are new. It was really something else, because Ferraris before didn't sound like that. So this is the first really screaming one, but that's only when you really open it up, which hopefully we'll get to find out later. So F1 gearbox, nothing I'm not familiar with. We're in neutral now, so the right pedal to go to first. Let's go. Now obviously I started with the F430 being my first Ferrari, and that was an F1. So I'm familiar with F1 gearboxes, but I'm really excited to try this first generation F1 to see how it is. As mentioned, we tried the 430 Scuderia a couple of episodes ago, and that was the final iteration. So we're going back to the beginning now to see how it is. Now, having warmed up a bit driving in snow, but you do feel that the F1 gearbox can be a bit jolty. First and second does kind of jolt you around. But now let's give it some drift. Does sound nice. That is the scream I was talking about. It's very high pitched, the 355, and back then when it was new, it sounded like an F1 car on road. The gearbox is actually quite smooth when you are stepping on it. It's not fast, obviously. You're changing gear, then there are faster F1 transmission after this. But it's not slow. It's not like I'm waiting for it to change gears. I actually think it's not bad at all at speed, the F1 gearbox. The engine revs like the modern-ish, 360, 430, 458 engine because, as mentioned, the use of the lightweight pistons and crank allows this car, for the first time in a two-seater V8, to go past 8,000 RPM. So in the 348, for example, the red line is about 8,000 RPM. This one, the red line is 8,500 RPM. So it begins the sort of trademark of V8 Ferraris, being high revving and good sounding. This was the first car that really achieved that. It sounds nice. It really sounds nice, this engine. Like that really distinguishes it from the series of 308 to 348 that's done down and the high revving engine. The gearbox is quick. I have no complaints of the F1 gearbox. The downshifts may not be as smart as the newer models like the 360 and 430 with the heel and toe. But driving it like a classic car, I don't see a problem at all with the gearbox. Talking a bit about the straight line speed, that you can feel is still an older V8 because while it revs quite freely and all the way to 8,500 RPM, it lacks torque. That's something similar with the 348 and 328. So in that sense, it's not a very fast car. It still doesn't feel that fast in this generation. It goes up smoothly, but you don't have that punch that starting from the 360 you do get. So it's a second gear now. It goes up smoothly, but you don't feel that punch. Wow, I'm there. I'm doing some crazy speeds now. Not really. Still takes some time. I think that's more of a torque issue. So the owner of this 355 had always loved the 355 since the day it was released. It was just his dream car since the beginning. And back about 10, 11 years ago, he finally found an opportunity to buy one. And he got this. He actually bought this from the dealer, which was Auto Italia at the time. And ever since, man, he spent a lot of time, money, and cherished the car and kept it up to date with maintenance and whatnot. Speaking of maintenance, this 355 is really one of the most expensive V8 models to maintain. Not only does the engine have to come out for cam belt changes because of the way the engine is placed, it also has other more notorious problems that comes out. For example, the valve guides. Valve guides have a tendency of wearing prematurely, and to change that is quite costly. You have to go into the engine and change it, and to find, usually most cars by now will have had them changed, but back then, to see if you have a valve guide problem, you usually see if the car starts blowing smoke from the exhaust. That would be a valve guide problem. The exhaust manifolds are prone to crack, and you have to change those, and those can be quite costly to replace. You have thought, the Ferrari would learn from their lessons, but the 430 has exactly the same problem with the manifolds cracking. So it's just typical Italian, Ferrari thing. And because this car was still made in, mostly made in steel, in other countries, the rusting of the chassis, the steel chassis, is also something to look out for. But in Hong Kong, I think the chances of that is lower because we don't have snow or salty roads. All in all, it has been an interesting experience trying the first F1. Having driven a bit, you do feel where its shortcomings are. As I said, in the downshifts or when doing low speeds, it can get a bit jolty. And just now, when I was at the roundabout, second gear, I didn't go to first gear, but the computer knows how to go to first gear itself. But with this one, it was hesitating a bit, unlike the 360 or 430 F1, where they have a smarter ECU management by then. But you know, that's part of the charm of driving a modern classic. You know, it's not supposed to be perfect. It's not supposed to be like a computer. And this car, I think, provides it. And that engine, no, I mean, growing up, admiring the 355's engine note every time I see it as a kid, now getting to experiencing it from behind the wheel is quite a bucket list item for me. I'm quite glad. I still remember when this car first came out, as I mentioned, it was an instant hit. And I clearly remember seeing Hong Kong legendary car racer Charles Kwan racing a Ferrari 355 in the Mandarina duck livery in Macau, in the Macau Supercar Cup, and winning Calvin Wong's roof CTR Porsche. Of course, it was because the roof broke down in the final few laps. But watching that, you know, as a kid growing up, you're seeing a brand new Ferrari, the 355, you know, in full race livery, racing around Macau and winning. These things you'll keep with you. And so I'm very glad that I get to try it, you know, in first-hand experience today. So I want to thank the owner for giving me this opportunity. Now, if you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe. Please also remember to click the bell button next to the subscribe button so you know when our next video is coming out, which will be soon. Thank you.